this matter of the manhaj, salaf, as well as deviated methodologies. These questions answered by Shaykh Aḥmad an-Najmī, raḥimahullāh. And alhamdulillah, after some form of gap in the lessons, we continue from here, inshallah. We continue with this particular question here, where the person poses the following. It says, فضيلة Shaykh Aḥmad an-Najmī, hafidhahullāh, بعض الناس يقولون عليك أن تأخذ الخير سواء كان من كتاب أو من الشريط، وعليك أن نترك الشر وقطع الذي فيها، فهل هذا الكلام صحيح؟ ومتى نعمل بمبدأ الموازنة بين الحسنات والسيئات أم أنه مبدأ خاطئ؟ وضحوا لنا ذلك بما ترونه مناسب وجزاكم الله خيرا. So the question is posed here to Shaykh Aḥmad an-Najmī, raḥimahullah, because some people say that upon us is to take the good that we find, whether that be the good in the books or the cassettes. Everyone knows what cassettes are, inshallah. No, cassettes, obviously, just as a ta'liq, I guess. Obviously, these questions are old. So it's referring to these questions at that particular point in time. Cassettes, and upon us is to take the good from these things and leave off the evil. Leave off the evil and leave off any errors found within. Is this speech correct? And how do we act in relation to this matter of al-Muwāzanah, weighing up and having some form of equality now between the good and the bad? And is this a particular methodology or way of dealing with things which is erroneous? Please clarify for us that which you see to be munasib, that which you see to be something which is correct and upright and suitable. And so the Shaykh responds by mentioning the Shaykh, and this is one thing to kind of understand here as well, is that from the uslūb of the ulama, is that if they ask the question, then they may not just answer the question in totality, but they will break down the answer based upon the question as well. So they'll say, for example, this aspect of the question is correct, but this aspect is incorrect. Now, this aspect that you've alluded to, yes, this is how we do things, but this aspect is an error, and they'll clarify the error. Now, so it says, بالنسبة الفكرة الأولى من السؤال نقول لا شك أن الخير يحرص عليه. So he says, as for the first part, there's no doubt the good, the person strives to be upon the good and cling to that good. الأولى الخير يحرص عليه. So this is referring to the first part where the person says that he seeks to take the khair from the individual. This taking the khair from the person, of course, this is something which is correct. ولكن إذا وضع لك سم في العسل فهل يمكن أن تأخذ هذا العسل? When the Shaykh then, however, gives the similitude, he gives the some form of metaphor. He says, if the poison was placed inside the honey, is it possible for you to take that honey? Is it possible that you can take that honey? نعم وتشربه, and that you drink from it. وتقول هذا خير, and say this is good. The action of taking the honey is good. مع أن فيه سما. Whilst with that being stated, with that being the case, there is within the honey itself poison. الجواب لا, لأن هذا العسل خلط بما فيه حلاكك. Why? Because within this asal, within this honey, there's something that has been mixed within it that can bring about your destruction. That can bring about your destruction. إذن فالذي يقول بهذا المبدأ لابد أن يكون عارفا بالخير. وعارفا بالشر الذي فيه حتى يحذره فعندئذ لا بأس بذلك، أو أنه يستعرض هذه الأشرطة نعم ينقضه أو ينقضها أو ما أشبه ذلك، لكن كونه يقول أنا آخذ ما فيها من الخير وهو لا يعرف يميز بين الخير والشر، فلا شك أنه قد أوبق نفسه وأهلكها. And so it says, so he's given that example. The example is clear, barakallahu fikum, sah? The example of the honey. He says, and so thus, if that being the case, this particular discussion here regarding the khair and the shar, the good and the bad, is just taking the good and we'll leave the evil. The person has to have knowledge of the good and knowledge of the evil, so that he is aware of it. And so that in this scenario, then that's no issue. But then the Shaykh, he goes on to mention in further detail, if this is the case where the person is seeking to critique, so he's seeking to critique what is found within that. If he's going to critique the shar that is found within a person's, for example, a person's speech that is found within his cassettes or his audio, then what is required? He has to have knowledge of it. What is required is the ilm, the ma'rifah, that he has to have the knowledge first. So a person now, it's not possible for him to just say that I'm just going to listen to it to critique it, but he's not grounded in any foundations, or to the extent that it's not required for him to critique it. So if we're looking at, for example, now, this individual, he's a mubtadi. Mubtadi or not mubtadi? Mubtadi, beginning talib ilm. He's just beginning upon his journey in talib ilm. He's just beginning in gathering knowledge. He's just beginning in terms of understanding the usul. How is he now going to start listening to the speech of an individual that will come with speech where fihi shar? Within that speech is evil. How is he going to listen to that speech, disseminate and differentiate between that which is khair and that which is shar? It's not possible. It's not possible. And so, as for the one that says, I'm going to take the good and leave the bad, وَلَا يَمَيْزْ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُ, he's not able to distinguish between that which is good and that which is bad, then he has set himself up for this path of destruction. He set himself up for this path of destruction. Just as, for example, going back to the example of the asal, the honey, and the poison found within. If that person, for example, let's say, for example, the way that the poison is formed is that to a trained eye, a person is able to spot it and extract it. Then okay, the person might be able to extract it and then drink from it. If he has a trained eye, i.e. he's the one that possesses ilm. Possesses knowledge. However, if now it just looks like the poison put inside and honey and the poison is all one and the same, then a person would be majnoon to drink from it. He'd be majnoon to drink from it. So likewise, now a person says, I'm going to sit with fulan, I'm going to sit with this individual, and I'm only going to take the good from him. First and foremost, when a person says, I'm only going to take the good from him, there's some degree of i'tiraf, there's some degree within that of recognition and acknowledgement that there may be some shar that will come from that individual. Because if a person says, I'm only going to take the good from him, you recognize that this person maybe has come with shar previously. And if he's come with it previously, then he's likely to come with it again. But in order to justify it to yourself and others, you said, I'm only going to take the good. And this was not the manhaj of the scholars in that regard, or Ahlul Hadith. And some argue that when it comes to narrations, that narrations have been narrated from some individuals from Ahlul Bid'ah. They say this, that you may find books and it mentions that a fulan has bid'ah with him and he's a narrator of hadith. Ibn Hajar, raḥimahullāh, he explains this in detail in terms of taking the narration from the individual. taking narrations from such an individual. First and foremost, the asl that we wouldn't take narrations from Ahlul Bid'ah. But essentially, the first and foremost, the thing is this. Ahlul Bid'ah or Bid'ah is of two types. Bid'ah mukaffara and Bid'ah mufassaka. Now, Bid'ah mukaffara, the Bid'ah of kufr. Bid'ah mufassaka, that the person is upon fisk, wrongdoing, in terms of that Bid'ah. If the person falls into the first type of Bid'ah, Bid'ah mukaffara, then his narration is not accepted. No, the narration is not accepted. So what do you have now? Bid'ah mufassaka. If now the person that is narrating this bid'ah or narrating this narration is from bid'ah mufassaka, however, huwa da'in ila bid'atihi, he's a caller to his bid'ah, then it's not accepted. Is that clear, barakallahu feekum? If he's a caller to his bid'ah, then if he's not a caller, then it's of two types of people. And in terms of narration, now we look at the narration. Is he narrating something that may be in aid of his bid'ah? Or is he narrating something that has nothing to do with his bid'ah? If he's narrating something which aids his bid'ah, then we don't accept it from him. If he's narrating something that has nothing to do with bid'ah, then we may accept it from him in that stage. So when people mention there's narrations that are from the people of innovation, then they mention it ala itlaq. They say it in a blanket statement, as a blanket statement. Why? Because, as we mentioned previously, speech such as this is speech where they are seeking to lay the foundations for a manhaj wasi' afya. They are trying to lay the foundations for a manhaj, a methodology that is all accommodating, and vast and spacious. The one that is wide and accommodating for everyone and anyone. So they'll be like, they'll say, for example, Imam Kadha accepted the narration of Fulan min Ahlul Bid'ah. So why can't I sit with Fulan, Mubtadi' Fulan, fi Masjid Fulan? However, they mention it, mentioned ala al-itlaq. They say it in a manner which is absolute. However, we just mentioned there's detail to it. There's detail to it. It's not just a case of the person, the Mubtadi', they accept the narration. The first and foremost is the type of bid'ah. Secondly, is he a da'i? Secondly, thirdly, what is he narrating? So it's all of these things, to the extent that it actually becomes difficult to accept the narration from the Mubtadi'. So it's not just a case of leaving the good and taking the bad. Likewise as well, if now we said that third thing, right, looking at narration itself, is he narrating something that may aid his bid'ah? If the person is talking about taking that narration, then that requires what? Knowledge. So he's an individual that is able to make the tamyiz, to differentiate between that narration or a particular narration that may be used to aid his bid'ah, or a narration that doesn't aid it in any way, shape, or form. But he needed the tools of knowledge itself. If he doesn't have knowledge, he's not able to take from that. Is that clear, barakallahu feekum? So when a person now states that we're going to take from this person, take the good and leave the bad, then of course this particular understanding is one which is upon error, and the individual has essentially gone astray by way of it. Now, as for the second part of the question, then the question was in relation to al-Muwāzanah bayna hasanat wa sayyi'at. Now, and this Muwāzanah, this particular Muwāzanah, what we understand from this issue of Muwāzanah is where the individual is seeking in that way to, if it's in the point of criticism, that they have to mention the good. So they make it mushtarat. They make this matter conditional. That if you're going to mention the bad, you have to mention the good. So this particular condition is one which is, again, a matter which is not legislated. And again, it's a condition and it's a foundation which is laid down to try and open up the doors towards Ahlul Sunnah, or the doors of Ahlul Sunnah towards Ahlul Bid'ah. Because as we mentioned previously in previous lessons, we have these false qawa'id. Naam, you have qawa'id. You have qawa'id that are correct, yani principles that are correct, and you have qawa'id that are batila. Now you have qawa'id that are false principles. Whether the principles are correct, whether the principles are false, they are all being laid down for the same purpose, which is tatbiq, for the same purpose of being implemented. So now, if a person is implementing the correct principles, you see that al-haq, he traverses upon the truth. However, if the person is laying down false principles, he's laying down those false principles with the intent, so that they can be implemented. You lay down these false principles in order for them to be implemented, so in order to open up the doors towards Ahlul Bid'ah. For example, so this principle here, where so you have to mention the person's good along with their evil. What's the evil found within that, Barakallahu Feekum? Question to pose to you. Why is that harmful? It gives credit to them. What's the harm with that? Might start taking from them.
You don't take the evil that they have serious.
No.
It's okay, innit? It's got good, but it's got bad, so be easy with it.
Exactly. It softens the stance towards the evil that they've come with. The whole qasd and intent behind the speech, the whole intent behind the speech is what? To warn you against the individual or their evil that they're upon. To warn you against it. So now, if you're saying, but X, Y, and Z, that takes away from the original qasd, that original intent. The original intent is to warn you against that person specifically, or just warn you against the evil that's found within. And then that's the first point. Second point, which is of course when you find in the nusus, the text, when the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as Shaykh Rabi' mentioned, we discussed this in the previous lesson, that when it comes to this muwāzanah, so Shaykh Rabi' he mentions that Allah tabarak wa ta'ala, when he mentions the people that are upright, he mentions them upon good. And he only mentions the good with them. Even though the people that are upright, they're from Bani Adam, so they may fall into sin here and there. They may fall into error, but the intent is to mention the good found within them. Why? Because it's meant to be a matter that encourages you to establish what they are upon, to be upon what they are upon. Inna lil-muttaqīna mafaza. Wallahu ma'a sabirin, for example. Allah Ta'ala praises these individuals, praises the muttaqeen, praises the sabirin. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. That indeed the believers have attained success. Mentioning the khair. Remember, mentioning the khair from their sifat, from their khisal, and he mentioned the khair, the good that is found within their characteristics, or mentioning the khair in terms of what will come in terms of their rewards in the akhirah. It doesn't mention, but they did X, Y, and Z rather. Because the opposite is true as well. If you hear about the good of an individual, then you want to strive to be like them and strive to do the good that they are doing. If now you as mentioned in that same maqam, in that same place, any evil, then your heart doesn't incline towards that individual and those actions that were upright. Likewise, the opposite. Shaykh also mentions, in terms of the opposite, when it comes to the matter of the evil individuals, whether it be the mention of the kuffar, whether it mention the munafiqeen, whether it be the mentioning of the khasirin, whether it be the mention of the mujrimeen. Allah Ta'ala mentions them, and he mentions them in a manner which is absolutely clear, that they're upon evil. Even though that maybe some of these individuals may have had good characteristics. It's not a case of that you generally find that an individual is shar, tamaman, min bidaya ila nihaya. He has evil from the beginning to the end. But the point is, the maqsad or the qasd is, the intent is that you're warning the person against the evil that's found with that individual. So you have to be haris, to be steadfast when it comes to warning against that evil. And so it's not about mentioning the good and mentioning whatever else. And it's important that this point is mentioned, because sometimes as well, you may feel the obligation to mention a khayr, some khayr that's found of the individual, in order to soften what you're going to mention after in terms of your rad. Naam. However, the qabul al-haq is none of your business as the da'i, the one calling. The qabul al-haq, now acceptance of the truth is between the mad'u and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Accepting the truth is between the mad'u, the one that's been called, and Allah tabarak wa ta'ala. Naam. All that you do is call. Naam. In accordance with what Allah ta'ala has commanded with, ud'u ila sabila rabbika bil hikmah wa maw'izatil hasana wa jadilhum billati hiya ahsan. Naam. Call the people with hikmah. Use wisdom, of course. Use wisdom and the good admonishment, and engage with them and dispute with them in a manner which is better. This is how the person discusses these matters. Allah Ta'ala has outlined that. If a person now gives da'wah and he adheres to these things, as for the acceptance of that, then that is between the mad'u, the one that's been called, and his Lord Tabarak wa Ta'ala. Because this is tawfiq from Allah. It's tawfiq from Allah that he accepts it. Nah, you can't force the person to accept the truth. Allah Ta'ala informs us, إِنَّكَ لَا تَهْدِي مَنْ أَحْبَبْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَهْدِي مَنْ يَشَاءُ. You do not guide those that you love. Nah, the guidance of those you love is not with you. However, Allah Ta'ala guides whoever he wills. It's Allah Ta'ala guides who he wills. So with that being said, when it's a case of we want to mention, or we have to mention the points about a person because we need to warn against something they've fallen into, or we need to warn against them specifically because they are musir ala khata. They are a person that is consistent upon evil, and musir. Then we mention that point only because that is the hadaf, that's the goal. We don't try to soften the blow. Now, we don't try to soften the blow and say, well, so he did write some good books, for example. He wrote some good books, but, X, Y, Z. Well, he gives a lot of dawah, alhamdulillah, but X, no. So-and-so, he fell into this, is opposed to the sunnah. Because the reality is, rudud, people have to understand when it comes to rudud, refutation is not mere shatam. Now, refutation is not merely just insulting an individual. And sometimes we come from that particular background where if you say something negative about a person, it's understood to be an insult. Or it's understood to be cursing a person. But the reality is not the case. The refutation in of itself is bayan al-haq. When it comes to refuting an individual, you're clarifying the truth. Because you're refuting what they're upon, and in that refutation, you're clarifying the truth of the matter that is found within. This is the truth of the matter. So-and-so fell into this evil, and this is the truth. This is the correct manhaj in that regard. So-and-so wishes to, for example, so-and-so wishes to split the ranks of Ahlul Sunnah, and Allah Ta'ala commanded us with ijtima' al-haq. Allah Ta'ala commanded us that we unite upon the truth. For example. So when these things are mentioned, we mention them as they are. Now, in addition to that, we have just going back to the statement as well about taking the good and leaving the bad. In addition to that, we have, of course, the statement of Muhammad ibn Sirin when he mentions "Inna hadha ilm al-din, fanzuru amma ta'khudhu dinakum." Indeed, this knowledge is the religion. So look to whom you take your religion from. This is your deen. It shouldn't be a case of you playing fast and loose with your deen. That a person is lax and negligent in relation to who he takes his deen from. Example that we mentioned before, we mention it again. If now I said to you, I'm going to leave your money, I got some money for you, I'm going to leave it with Abdullah. What's the first thing you're going to ask? Who's Abdullah? You want to know Abdullah? You're probably going to want to know his credit rating, his credit score, all that stuff. Who is he? How is he with money? Naam. Who is Abdullah? That's money. What about your deen, your akhirah, al-fawz wal najah, success, salvation, Jannah wal nar? The person said, okay, I'm just going to leave it with Fulan. I'm going to sit with Fulan and I'll take the good and leave the bad. You wouldn't do that in any other aspect in your life. So why deen? Naam. Likewise, Ibn Battah, he mentions, احذروا مداخل الصغائر أو صغائر البدعة. He says, beware of the beginning stages of the minor forms of bid'ah. For indeed it leads to the major. Likewise, the Barbahari mentions the similar. He mentions a similar fact that the bid'ah generally begins with small things and leads to the greater things. So you now sitting with the individual upon the wahm, the false belief that you're going to take the good and leave the bad. Naam, you're going to take the good and leave the bad. What ends up happening is that you're going to take in whatever's being said. You don't have control over the heart and what the heart accepts. So now the person saying, "Well, take the good and leave the bad." So it may be something which is, in comparison to what many things we see, could be something which is minuscule, negligible, a small amount, but it's mukhalif lil haqq. It's something that opposes the truth. Small. But the small things, this is the madkhal lil Shayṭān. The Shayṭān finds the madkhal, the Shayṭān finds that entry point, and then he will exploit that entry point. We discussed it before. When it comes to the matter of Tashayyu, in the Shi'ism. When you think of the Shia now, you think of these people that are not long from now on the streets all over the world beating themselves, beating their children, spitting blood. The individuals that have the stone, they pray on the stones. These individuals that curse the companions, and they say in evil. That's what comes to mind. The first thing that comes to mind when you think of Tashayyu now. But then when you really ponder about where it began, Tashayyu, where it began, the Shi'ism, where it began with what? It began with the mere actions or the mere i'tiqad, where the people believed that Ali should have been the Khalifa before Uthman. Ali should have been the Khalifa before Uthman. So they agreed about the fadl of all the companions. It's not to the extent where they are now, where they curse some of the companions or they make takfir of some of the companions. No, they agreed about the fadl of all the companions. They agreed of the fadl of all of the khulafa. But they opposed Ahlul Sunnah and they opposed the Muslimin when it came to this particular tartib. Because the Muslims were upon that particular way, that particular order. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. And they were upon the same thing. Abu Bakr, they agreed. Umar, they agreed. However, it was when it came to Uthman and Ali. That's where it began. In comparison to what we see now, it's minuscule, it's negligible. But it's the entry point. So now if we compare that, barakallahu feekum, to this point here, where an individual says, I'm going to take the good and I'm going to leave the bad. That evil may be something where it just passes him. He doesn't even consider it. It's negligible, but it's mukhalif al-haq, but it settles within the heart and establishes a greater evil later on. And so this is why the person that traverses upon that particular manhaj, he's taken a particular way of halak. He's taken a particular way of destruction. Because this is not how a person engages in that. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. So, after that, the next question. Goes al-alim بأهل البدع يمكن أن يحذر منهم. And so it says, as for the one that has knowledge of Ahlul Bidah, it's possible that he can It's the next question. Possible that he can warn against them. However, there are those that are from Ahlul Bid'ah that are planted amongst Ahlul Hadith, yani Ahlul Sunnah, the Salafiyin. Hatta, to the extent that they deceive the general people. فكيف المخرج من مثل هذا? Now, how does the person seek exit and refuge in something like this? So the person now, he's with the people of, there's people that know and have knowledge about Ahlul Bid'ah, people of innovation. Then there are individuals that are in the ranks of Ahlul Sunnah, but they're planted amongst the ranks of Ahlul Sunnah. In reality, they're from the people of innovation, and they display the traits of the people of innovation. But the fact that they're planted amongst Ahlul Sunnah, it causes them to lead the general people astray. How do we find safety in that regard? The Shaykh begins by mentioning Ahl al-Haqiqa, أن الناس يختلفون ولا شك ولكن غالبا أن كل من أسر سريرة لابد أن يظهرها الله على لمحة وجهه ولا فلتات لسانه. فالذي يظهر للناس بأنه على سنة وسلفية ومبتدئ فلا بد أن الله سيكشف عوره، يعني مهما بقي مدنسا. نعم، مدسا عفوا. And so the Shaykh, he mentioned, this is a reality, this point here is one of beauty. Why? Because it brings comfort to the Sunni. It brings comfort to the Sunni that contemplates it. Because no doubt, when you see individuals and they are within the ranks of Ahlul Sunnah and they start to either build enmity amongst the ranks of the Ahlul Sunnah, or they start to build principles and say that these principles are principles of Salafiyah, where they're principles that are of Ahlul Bid'ah, but it's planted amongst Ahlul Sunnah. The one that is aware of that, it can be something which worries the individual or disheartens the person when they see the person traversing upon that particular path. And they're upon that path of destruction where they're essentially destroying themselves, but trying to destroy others around them as well. But the Shaykh, he brings comfort in regards to this in terms of his answer. Well, he mentions that the reality is that people differ. People differ, and people differ in terms of understanding. And it's a must that someone's reality will become apparent. Someone's reality will become apparent. And that their speech upon the tongue will become apparent. So if now, for example, يظهر للناس, he makes it apparent to the people, or that he shows to the people that he's Salafi, upon the way of the Salaf. However, he's a mubtadi'. However, he's an individual upon bid'ah. فَلَا بُدَّ, and it's a must, and it will occur that Allah Ta'ala will expose them. Allah Ta'ala will expose them. And so within that, as mentioned, is comfort to the one. Because a person may see that this individual is laying down the principles that oppose the haqq, or a person is a means of splitting amongst Ahlul Sunnah. Maybe one individual, maybe a group of people. And he sees it. And it can be disheartening when you see it. But what you find within advice such as these is essentially the underlying advice is a sabr. The underlying advice is that the person remains patient, because it's a must. It's inevitable that this individual that does this will be exposed. An individual that does this will be exposed. And so, and it's a must that this emanates from him. It's a must that this emanates from him, and this exposure comes. And if for those that have understanding of the history of those, when I say history, I mean even recent history. When I say recent history, I mean within the last few decades. Something which is relatively recent. We had individuals that were amongst the Salafis. Individuals that held, held to high esteem amongst the Salafis. From them, for example, Abul Hasan al-Ma'rabi. From them, for example, Ali Hassan al-Halabi. From them, for example, Ibrahim al-Ruhaili. From them, example, Yahya al-Hujuri. All these individuals, now, they were all seen to be people of high esteem, scholars. Now, people that were, it seemed to be individuals that were defenders of the da'wah. Defenders of the da'wah. And then it became clear to some individuals before others. It became clear that these people were trying to establish principles within the deen in order for them to be what? Implemented, of course, as we mentioned earlier, in order for them to be implemented to lead the people astray. Now, and so with for example, the case of Abul Hasan al-Ma'rabi, establishing principles amongst the Salafis. Now, it's not just a case of when it comes to, for example, a tablighi talking. فهذا أمر يعني كما يقال يعني بلاش. It's free, it's easy. You see him, turban his head, he's like, okay, خلاص, it's tablighi. No problem. Naam. Or you see a khariji, clearly khariji, makes takfir of the rulers, makes takfir of everyone in this path. It's just easy. Type. But now we're speaking about an individual, he's amongst the ranks. And he's speaking. And he's using adillah, he's using proofs. Type. And then now, for example, these proofs are being rejected by Ahlul Hadith, the people of truth. The A'imma, these proofs are being rejected. Upon the people is to remain patient. Remain patient. Because when these things are being rejected, they're being rejected for good reason, because it's batil. But upon the people is to remain patient. Just because it's not clear to everyone all at once, over time it will become clearer. Abul Hasan al-Ma'rabi, his fitna is over 20 years ago now. Split Ahlul Sunnah all over the world. Split Ahlul Sunnah all over the world. Because he gave this particular presence or this particular surah image of being upon Salafiyah. And with that surah, he sought to enter false principles into, in and amongst the ranks of the Salafis. But it's Allah Ta'ala that will expose. Because where did he end up? Anyone know how he ended up? This same individual that was regarded as being from amongst the Salafi, Tulab al-Ilm, Mashayikh. He ended up praising Hassan al-Banna, praising Ikhwan al-Muslimin. He started there, because as we mentioned earlier as well, it's not just for the follower, but for the caller as well. The bid'ah and the inhiraf, the deviation, may begin as something smaller or something which resembles haqq. But it will get worse and worse and worse, because Shaytan's found the madkhal now. The Shaytan's found the entry point. And so it will get worse and worse and worse. And it's what happened with this individual. So the person remains patient. Likewise, Yahya al-Hujuri, when he was speaking about the scholars, speaking ill of the scholars, and he had this proof against that scholar, that proof against that scholar. What became clear is that his speech about the scholars wasn't just one thing. His speech went all the way to the companions. Uthman ibn Affan. So it's a case of, there will be individuals, and they will come and they will go. And lil asaf, sad to say that some individuals as well, they will take people with them. They'll take people with them. Allah Ta'ala save us from that. But upon the people of Sunnah is to remain patient and cling to the qawa'id. There's no point learning the qawa'id, and that if, for example, now when the fitna comes, you throw them all out the window. What's the point learning the qawa'id? Those qawa'id, as we mentioned, whether they be qawa'id sahiha or qawa'id batila, people lay down the qawa'id so they can be implemented. They lay down the principles so they can be implemented. So now, if a time of fitna comes, you lay down the principles. Now, you try to lay down the principles before. Now, as they say, play a plan for the rainy day. When that storm comes, like that fitna comes, you have the principles. Don't be that individual, barakallahu feekum, as well, that indulges in the mas'ala itself. What I mean by that is there may be an issue that occurs, and you may be well versed in that issue, but you are not well versed in the usul that are found within that issue, the foundations and the principles. Does that make sense? That the person must be aware of the foundations of that issue, because the person now, he may study that issue and he may come out and be successful in terms of taking the right position in terms of that issue. But now he's made it something which is localized and acute, only specific to that particular issue. However, if he's a person of qawaid, wal usul, if he's a person of principles, if he's a person of foundations, he applies those sounds, the same foundations, when that issue occurs, when that issue occurs, when that issue occurs. And this is how you find the people upon success, because they apply the same foundations time and time and time again. Now, because the foundation don't change. All that changes are the names. All that changes are the shubuhat, the doubts. Remember the shubuhat are muhdath. They're newly invented, they're new. So they're going to be different. They may resemble other shubuhat of the past, but they may be completely new as well. So when the person doesn't give any real credence or importance to the shubha, he clings to those qawaid, he clings to those principles. And that's why it's important to learn these principles. Learn these principles. Learn what do Ahlul Sunnah believe in this? What do Ahlul Sunnah believe in that? So that when these times do come, the person knows what to do. Now, and so, with that being said as well, when the person has these innovations with them, then the person will become exposed. And with that as well, he'll be warned against. You warn against the person and their innovations. So really and truly, aslan, the individual must remain patient upon that. Now, individuals must remain patient upon that. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Now, I just mark the next question. Now, so now, so the question mentions there's some, you find that some of the younger طلاب العلم, they busy أشغلوا أنفسهم بكلام عن الحزبيين وجعلوا ذلك في جل أوقاتهم وضيعوا طلب العلم الذي ينفعهم عند ربهم. So you find that some of the طلاب العلم, they may, the younger طلاب العلم, they busy themselves with speaking about the Hizbiyin, and they make this the essence of the time that they spend, and it takes them away from, or they waste away the time that they should be spending seeking knowledge of their Lord. And seeking knowledge of that which differentiates the khabith min at-tayyib, that which is evil or harmful, from that which is good and pure. أتى ما يعرف عنده من الحزبيين أخطاء. And so it becomes their the himma with them, that what is important for them, the statement ما رأيك في فلان ما رأيك في فلان. What's your opinion about so and so? What's your opinion about so and so? وأصبحت غالب جلساتهم في هذا الشأن. And the majority of their gatherings are about that particular matter. And فما نصيحتك? What's your advice for these individuals? And how can you encourage them about taking the knowledge seriously, which is a means of protection for them from bid'ah. It's a means of protecting them from bid'ah. And so the Shaykh raḥimahullāh mentions الحقيقة أنا مبالغة في هذه الأمور التي تخرج بطالب العلم أن نطاق الحق إلى الجدل وتضييع الوقت في كلام الذي لا ينتج عنه فائدة. So the Shaykh begins to mention that the reality is this matter where the person becomes, or it's an exaggerated manner, where they engage in this speech about Ahlul Bid'ah, and it takes them away from beneficial knowledge, and it leads them to nothing but jadal, leads them to nothing but disputing and wasting away of time. Then what results in this? There's nothing that results in this. There's no fa'idah. There's no benefit that results in this. Rather, the people, this takes from the time of the people. This is something which is not correct, not appropriate. بل يجب على طالب العلم يستغل وقته في طاعة الله. But what is important for طالب العلم is that he benefits his time in obedience to Allah. وفي بحث عن العلم والحضور الحلقات, and in researching knowledge and attending the حلقات العلم, the gatherings of knowledge, the circles of knowledge. ولا بأس أن يسمع تعذير منهم وبيان صفات حتى يحذرهم. There's no harm in the person who hears from the tahdir. So he hears about the warning, and he hears the reasons for the warning, and he hears the sifat, the characteristics of that warning. There's no harm in that. However, if we leave all of our time for that, ولا نشتغل بطلب العلم الذي ينفعنا فهذا لا شك أنه خطأ كبير. Then no doubt this is a major error. This is a major error. What we mentioned here, what as the Shaykh here mentions, essentially is the correct approach when it comes to mu'amala to Ahlul Bid'ah. Mu'amala of Ahlul Bid'ah. How Ahlul Bid'ah are dealt with, or Hizbiyin are dealt with in terms of the matter of deen. In terms of the matter of deen and taking knowledge from them. So we mentioned previously in all these previous questions where people suggest that you cannot rule against Ahlul Bid'ah or it's ghiba, all of these things. And the Shaykh has outlined, and he's outlined the particular manhaj as well, in terms of there's no muwāzanah. You don't just mention the good because you have to, because you mention along with the bad. No. The Shaykh he mentions in those previous answers, it's important to clarify the truth, clarify the reality that a person is upon. All of this is true. And we mentioned previously alongside that some of the narrations regarding that. From them, the narrations of Imam Ahmad, where he likens the rad ala mukhalif, the one that opposes the haqq, refuting him, he likens that to this matter of jihad. He likens it to jihad. So we know this is how the person reverses and how a person acts. But with this answer here, the Shaykh is mentioning as well with that, how the person establishes that he does not make it the one and only thing to do with his talab. If anything, it's the mabda, it's the beginning stage of his talab. Because before you begin the talab, you need to know who to take the knowledge from in the first place. So you understand who to take knowledge from. You understand by way of the tawfiq, the praise, the ta'dil. You understand by way of the jarh, by way of the dispraise. who not to take from. Now you've understood that, seek the knowledge. The person should not now make this the himma where he engages in the speech about this over and over and over again. Because then it could possibly as well fall into the person actually fall into the ghiba, which is muharrama. The ghiba which is haram. And Shayṭān will make tazyin of it. Shayṭān will beautify it to the person. And beautify it. For example, the person starts to insult the individual. Yani fi'lan. So what we mentioned earlier what? That the person, if he refutes him, refuted bid'ah, then this is khair, this is good. Because it's bayan al-haq. You're establishing the truth and clarifying the truth. However, now, if the person starts to fall into speaking ill of them, or cursing them, or insulting them, or insulting their appearance, for example, a Shayṭān can beautify that. And you see it as a matter which is tafih. You see it as a matter which is merely minuscule. Again, negligible. Why? Because you believe that it's ahlul bid'ah. We can speak about ahlul bid'ah. Now, we have the statement of Imam Shu'bah, where he mentions ta'al, نغتاب في الله. تعال حتى نغتاب في الله. Let's come, and so to the extent or so that we can backbite for the sake of Allah. Now, when he's mentioning this, he's mentioning of course, رد أهل البدع, رهد المخالفين, refuting the mukhalifin, clarifying the truth. He's not mentioning the ghibatan for the sake of Allah, cursing the individual. Because, barakallahu feekum, the messenger of all of our speech is bana'an ala qawl an-nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. لما قال من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خير أو ليصمت. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then let him speak good or remain silent. And when you speak, make sure that speech is good. That speech has to be a speech yasil ila fa'ida. That speech has to reach a benefit. There has to be an overall benefit. Naam. So when you're speaking about the people of innovation, you're speaking about it so that the people are aware of the innovation and the person that's propagating it or the person that's practicing it. So now, how is it a case that the person or the people are merely going over and over and over again until it's no longer reached that purpose, or that purpose has already been established, and the person starts to fall into other things? This now is mubalagha. Now this is now a degree of exaggeration in that regard, and excessiveness in that regard. And that, of course, is something which is blameworthy. So with that being said, this is why the Shaykh, he mentions this particular point. To mention, and to mention in addition to those points about the importance of refuting the people of innovation, that is done upon a manner, which is balanced. Balance doesn't mean you have to mention the good. A balance means the speech has to reach or attain its goal. That goal being essentially warning the Muslims against that harm. Once that goal is achieved, alhamdulillah, we move on. Now, once that goal is achieved, we move on. And so as a general benefit from this, it's something that we should all be aware of, is the matter of the lisan, the tongue. When the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentions that there's a person يلقي الكلمة or يقول الكلمة لا يلقي بالا, he says a word and he gives it no attention, he has no thought of it, but this is the means of entering Jannah. And likewise the opposite, a person says a word and he has no thought for it, just says it, and it's a means of entering the fire. So when we speak with a hadaf, with a goal. We speak and we say that we're saying this for this particular reason. But this is a means of our salvation, inshallah. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. And with that we'll conclude. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullahu khaira. La yafadakum jami'an. Barakallahu feekum. Wa sallallahu wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Also, just for those that are unaware, that inshallah next Saturday we'll be having the conference in the masjid with Shaykh Abu Iyad, Shaykh Awais Tawil, Shaykh Abdullah al-Hammami, and Shaykh Abu Khadija. So those that are able to attend, inshallah, I encourage the brothers to attend, and it'll be a day of benefit, and one which inshallah will be something of as mentioned, great benefit for all those that attend. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakumullah khairan. Allah yakumullah.
So the other question, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when Salafi brothers are discussing matters, different matters, some mention things like, when they mention the elders, they mention things like, the elders want yes men around them. How do you respond to such comments? Someone said, like, say two people are talking, and then you giving them examples like, let's go to the elders, and then the other group or party doesn't agree to your stance to say let's go to the teachers, but they say things like, the elders expect yes men, meaning that they're not listening basically.
Okay.
Because they just want people around them that just agree to whatever they want.
Yeah.
How do you respond to such comments?
The first thing is obviously this assumption or the statement of yes man. First and foremost, had to delete. That's the first one. Bring your proof. Just because you disagree with them doesn't mean now that they are yes men. Within that as well, and over the years, a person should be very wary of these statements, because this is a statement that on many occasions is built around ujub, self-amazement. When I say that, I mean that a person, lisan al-hal, or what it necessitates is these individuals are yes men, whilst I think for myself. I'm not a yes man. And this is the speech of individuals that over the years, as I mentioned before, what you find is that people come and go. Maybe you find that the same shubahat will be there. Some of the shubahat are different as well, but the speech will resemble one another. And when you find that it's the speech of individuals that have left the jama'ah, that left the body of the Salafis in their land, whether it be here, it be America, whether it be in any other land, they profess to be individuals that we think for ourselves. We're not just going to follow the crowd. No, we're not just essentially yes men. The reality is this: you are only, upon you is only to say yes to the kitab and the sunnah. Only say yes to the kitab and the sunnah. If whatever a person is upon is muwafaqa, the kitab was sunnah, then we're with them. We're with them. Irrespective of what is said about them, in terms of they're just followers or whatever else. It's always said. People are always going to say things. And generally speaking as well, these things are said when there's a lack of adillah. There's a lack of adillah, a lack of qawaid, lack of usul, then the person will say they're just this or they're just that. They call names. But we look at the specifics. If now these people are people of haqq, whether they are callers to the haqq, whether they're aiding the call to the haqq, whether they are just merely people that are cleaning the masjid, do you know what I mean? You help them. You aid them in that regard. And the person doesn't give any attention to the blame or the blamers. But within that statement, Taib, is, like as mentioned, is a statement where the person is saying, they are like that, but I'm not. No, I'm not. I think for myself. These people don't think for themselves. Beware of anyone whose tongue is moist fi dhikr al-ikhwanihi as-salafiyyin. Anyone that mentions his Salafi brothers with evil, with ease, beware of that individual. A person does not speak about Ahlul Sunnah with ease. The point is, let's say for example, kalamuhul haqq. He's speaking the truth. The point is with that as well, You say it when it needs to be said. Again, going back to what we mentioned just a minute ago, when you speak, it has to have a goal. There has to be a goal. There has to be a reason why you're mentioning this. And not just that your speech about this, about Ahlul Sunnah, becomes easy upon the tongue. Okay, this is another madkhal of Shayṭān. Another madkhal of Shayṭān. So no, this speech, first and foremost, bring the proof, or we're absolutely rejecting it. We're absolutely rejecting it. That's the long and short of it. No.
I've got, sorry, one more question, yeah? Is there a sign of hypocrisy indeed if it's permissible to do one thing for yourself, but you make it permissible for someone else? So say if you do some action that you for yourself you think is fine, but then when you discussing with others and they try to do the same thing you think it's okay to do, they say to you no. Is that a sign of hypocrisy? Are they being like a hypocrite?
No, so obviously the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's outlined either the signs of hypocrisy, the khisal of hypocrisy, or the signs of the munafiq. Speaks, he lies. When he's promised, he makes a promise, he breaks a promise. If he makes an agreement, he breaks the agreement essentially. And if he speaks fajr, he uses foul speech. So this is what we understand from hypocrisy. As for a person that says something for himself, but then makes or declares to be haram for another, this is definitely a sign of a sickness of an individual. Allah Ta'ala rectify them, but we'll say it's from nifaq. We'll say it's from nifaq. But the person is maybe there's some degree of misunderstanding in their understanding of deen, and Allah Ta'ala knows best if they are doing that. No, barakallahu feek.
Last question, sorry. Last one. When you mentioned earlier the two bid'ahs, you said there's two bid'ahs. One is kufr bid'ah.
Mukaffara, mufassaka.
Yeah. So can you give me an example of what is this? Because I couldn't understand it. So because I know kufr, but what's kufr and bid'ah? How does that?
So, for example, you have the bid'ah of the Barelvis, for example. So they have that bid'ah where they start to worship the graves and things like this. This one, that bid'ah that they do this, but within it, it's kufr as well, isn't it? Because they're worshiping other than Allah. Then you have the bid'ah mufassaka, for example, the bid'ah of the tablighis, where specifically when they say we're going out for 40 days. Now this is not done by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So bid'ah, but within that bid'ah mufassaka, for example. Barakallahu feekum. Last question. بارك الله فيك جزاكم الله خير بارك الله فيكم إخوان جزاكم الله وصلى الله وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.